we do is I put the stream out on Facebook on several different pages. We actually try to make the show hard to avoid. So
yeah.
So at this is the point where I share the stream out to my own personal page, to the TWiRT page, and usually to the broadcasting club. Oh, there we are. Just like Suncast said, there we are. We'll like and share this over to the TWiRT page. And there it is. At this point, I usually greet our live view guests. Let's see, let's share this over to my own page. And one more share over to a group, the Broadcasting Club. There we go. And it's the only one that easily lets me tag you. I know you're over there at the Broadcasting Club page. Oh, yeah, I need to. The cows? Why do you say that? I don't get it. Sorry. The cows are making noise. Okay. Okay. I don't live near any cows. There are plenty of deer in my neighborhood and turkeys. But no. Yeah, sometimes I drive out in the country and I notice, some farm that's got cows. Who's that actor that plays the cowboy with the big old mustache? He's got a real deep voice.
Sam.
Yeah.
It'll come to me.
Someone just posted a meme of him it says, "Being a man is not easy. No makeup, no wig. If you're ugly, you're just ugly."
Yeah, that's true.
That's right. Chris Tarr said he would try to be with us for a short time. He's got a terrible case of bronchitis, it turns out. And I said, man, I want you in here when we're talking about SNMP. He said, I'll try to join you, but if I join you, it may not be for very long. So,
all right,
we'll hope he can make it. Oh, you have a hologram of Chris? Oh my gosh. What is it? Can you show me what that looks like? I don't know what it looks like. Let's see. IP addresses. Dennis, I'm actually a little punchy. I was up till 4:00 this morning helping some colleagues in American Samoa to configure and install one end of an IP radio link, and we weren't expecting to have to do that. So I've been awake a while. I got about 2.5 hours sleep last night.
Ooh. I don't care for that.
What's that?
2.5 hours sleep. I don't operate very well like that. I've done it too many times in the business, so of course.
I can do that it's time to start. Let's see if I have all my props with me. Let's see. I need to grab where is it? Maybe I left it somewhere else. I'll tell you what, we'll talk about the Nautel thing. Alrighty. Hi everybody on the network. Glad that you're here. We're about to broadcast live here on the Facebook and YouTube. And I'm excited about this show. I know I say that almost. If you don't hear me say it, you know I'm probably not excited. I'm excited about this show with Dennis Sloatman coming up in a minute. We got one great topic that you need to hang on for, because sometime during this hour, we're going to talk about aggressive neglect. You know, that sounds like a great name for a college band. Aggressive neglect. All right. Yeah. Hey, we're getting the band back together. Aggressive neglect. Isn't that what we've been doing for the past few years? All right. This is episode 619 for November 17th, 2022. And all right. Suncast, I guess we've already got the thumbs up from you because we're streaming and all's good. You've got the tape rolling, so we're going to record this for posterity. Doggone it, I didn't bring any alcohol to properly prepare myself for this show. I'll have to wing it with dry. All right, here we go. That's episode 619. We'll start the show in 3, 2. Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb at the top of the tower there. Thank you, Charles Kinney, for that light bulb. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host here, and I'm delighted that you're with us. We're going to have a good show today, a very interesting and maybe even a little bit of an intellectual show. I hope to learn a few things today. Well, hey, I'm in the Telos Alliance studio, as if you couldn't tell. I feel like a NASCAR driver, right? My sponsors are all around. Thanks to Telos Alliance for providing me with a little bit of time every week to do this show, This Week in Radio Tech. So I'm in Nashville, Tennessee today, as I usually am. Chris Tarr, my usual co-host, may be able to join us and may not. He's feeling a little under the weather. And one of our topics that we're talking about today is remote control via SNMP. And Chris has a good handle on that. So he may join us for a few minutes. If he doesn't, we'll soldier on without him. But Chris, I wish you well, and I hope you can join us for a few minutes at least. All right, that's my report. It's cold and it's cold and clammy outside, and just it feels like November, probably because it is. Here we are, just a week before Thanksgiving. And that brings up a topic that really haven't covered yet, and that is, what are we doing for a Thanksgiving show? I'm thinking about recording it before Thanksgiving Day. We'll have it live whenever we do record it, maybe, and we'll play it back on Thanksgiving Day as well. So maybe when you're done with the turkey and the cranberry sauce and the stuffing and the pumpkin pie and all that, you can sit back and watch This Week in Radio Tech. Try to keep you entertained and informed as well. All right, enough about me and the show. I want to bring forth our guest. Our guest is Dennis Sloatman, a name you probably have heard before and thought, this guy's a top quality engineer. Well, we're gonna either confirm or dispel that myth. Dennis, welcome in. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, Kirk. Thanks for having me. It's, looking forward to it.
Okay, right away when I see you, I got to ask, why the cap? You wear the cap in so many pictures. I see you on Facebook. You're an outdoor exercise kind of guy. You seem to really, be into physical fitness, and you're wearing this cap all the time. Are you cold?
Well, today it's pretty cold here, and it just feels good in my ears. It's no more complicated than that.
Okay. All right. And hey, we didn't talk about it, but sometime during the show, I would like to talk to you about, your outdoor physical fitness. You seem like the kind of person that I always think, man, Dennis is out there riding a bike or doing something. I should be doing that as well, instead of sitting around, drinking
it's
another.
Difficult when you're working full time, though. It is very difficult to find a time, especially during these short winter days.
Oh my goodness!
I'm all for daylight savings time year round, by the way.
Yeah. A politician ought to run on that platform right there. I think,
I think Marco Rubio is.
he might be. Yeah. Maybe you've seen the map. You've seen the map of in the U.S. and maybe covers a bit of Canada. Welcome to This Week in Time Zones. Whereas the far northwest corner of each time zone, if we stay on daylight saving time year round, those people have a problem. And so I'm thinking that they need to redraw the maps a little bit and cut those corners off that, I want to say, get dark at, I don't know, 2:30 in the afternoon, some ridiculous time in those corners of the U.S. portion of the time zones. Have you ever looked at that? Have you ever thought about that?
No, I just find it interesting to read about the Lapland area, northern Norway, and so on and so forth, where it's sun 24 hours a day in the summer and virtually 10 minutes of daylight in the winter. Yeah. Those kind of extreme weather conditions I always find very very fascinating.
Some broadcast engineers are, do travel around the world or have gotten to. I was very fortunate in getting to go to the Telos Alliance Development Lab in Riga, Latvia. I've been there, I don't know, 3 or 4 times or so, and I've been there in the still of winter. I mean, in January, early February, and the sun doesn't come up till I don't know. Um, 10 a.m. It seems to go down about 3 o'clock. So you've got literally 4.5 hours of daylight and so many hours of darkness. It's a little weird. But I've also been there in the summer where me, Steve Church, lots of other people from Telos, we'd all be having dinner out next to the Baltic Sea. And it would be 11 o'clock at night and the sun was still up. And then we'd go to bed and, I'd like wake up to go pee or something. 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and the sun's coming up. Just, you get a taste of that, and you think, man, how do? I guess you get used to it, don't you?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
so.
Well, we've got some cool topics to cover. Dennis and I do, along with you. We're going to talk about this thing Dennis calls aggressive neglect. I can't wait for that. Education, and not just this word education, but how it really helps us do our jobs. SNMP remote control, and then Dennis is going to give us some great tips on cable management, the frustrations, and what the benefits are of doing cable management right. You know what? Sometimes I'm just lazy or in a hurry usually, and I don't get cable management done very well. It ends up looking like one of those horrible pictures you find when you search a Google image for, bad cable management. So we're going to talk about that. But right now, let's hear from Nautel. Nautel is doing their Transmission Talk Tuesdays. They got another one coming up now. The first one in a while is coming up this coming Tuesday, November 22nd. Things kind of settle down that week, so you ought to set aside time in your calendar to go to nautel.com. Do that now. You can do it while I'm talking. Nautel, because you'll have the form filled out by the time I'm done talking about it. Nautel.com/webinars, and then click on Transmission Talk Tuesday. Actually, I'm embarrassed. I was promoting this really hard, right? And I'm a little embarrassed. I'm the guest. But this coming Tuesday on Transmission Talk Tuesday, we're talking about virtualization and containerization, and maybe how that can apply to transmitter sites, but more importantly, how that applies to broadcasters in general and you as an engineer. Some other topics coming up the next week. So after Thanksgiving here in the U.S., IT security questions that you should be asking. And in December, they've got a couple of shows, just two. Site Stories is coming up in December on the 13th, Tuesday the 13th, and December 20th, just before Christmas. It's their holiday season recap. And Jeff Welton does an amazing job with this show, Transmission Talk Tuesdays. It's not a webinar. It's a roundtable discussion. Sure, the guest is going to pontificate a bit on whatever they're pontificating on, and then you get to ask questions of the guest in a roundtable style discussion. You can either enter your questions by text chat, or Jeff Wilton can bring you on into the show, and you can ask your question or give your comment or tell your story, whichever it may be. Thanks a lot, Nautel, at nautel.com/webinars. And as usual, we'll have a link in the show notes. All right. Dennis Sloatman is my guest. Dennis, you've been doing this engineering thing a long time. And why don't you just, for those folks who don't know you, and I barely know you, how'd you get started in this engineering thing? And I'm, you're well respected, and I want to understand why people think so highly of you. So how do you get started?
Well, first off, it's my sterling sense of humor. You ask about my cap. If we all had hair like you, Kirk, I wouldn't wear a cap so often. But none of us are blessed in quite the same way you are. Um, well, I got started back in 1970. Actually, sooner. I had a radio station in my basement when I was 12. Built my first transmitter when I was 16 on an old TV chassis, and we broadcast around the block basically on a radio station I had in the basement. Uh, and then at the age of 16, I got my first job as a DJ, and I bounced around various stations in Rockford, Illinois, Northern Illinois, and also Iowa, where I was an all-night country jock for several years. And at K-Hawk, by the way, KHAK. And that was my first chief engineer job. Um, barely knew what I was doing. The first time I had to fix a transmitter, it turned out to be a blocker capacitor, but I didn't even know that's what that was back
Hmm.
then. But you get your first fix of a transmitter, and you suddenly you feel like a lion, So that's how I got started, and then I went to work for Harris Corporation for a while, field service and automation, which was a kind of a specialty of mine, and digital electronics, that sort of thing. Um, Went back to Iowa, then I went to Orlando, Florida for 28 years as a chief engineer. I approached college a little differently than most people. I didn't even set foot in college till I was 35.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I went for 9 years. I finally got my electrical engineering degree at the University of Central Florida. So I had a lot of hands-on practical experience, I guess you could say, before I went to college. And the benefit of the education, it's not absolutely necessary in our business, but the benefit of the education is I understand down to a lower level, which sometimes is useful, not always, but sometimes useful in troubleshooting and problem solving. I spent a lot of time learning mathematics, one short of a math minor, and what that taught me more than anything else, because people always say, what's the benefit of this mathematics? And what it taught me more than anything else is problem solving. And it made me, I think, a pretty good troubleshooter because you follow a process, and that's what you learn with mathematics. After that, in Orlando, I went to Richmond, Virginia as chief engineer. I went to Los Angeles as VP of engineering for iHeart. Um, Came back to Richmond because we wanted to be closer to our family as VP of engineering for Summit Media. And then I elected to retire a year past the COVID thing. And that didn't last long. But 10 months later, I got contacted by a group in uh, Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads, Tidewater, whatever you want to call it.
Uh-huh.
And it's a large market, and been kind of exciting and energizing to get back into it. So yeah, it's just fun working in large market radio again. And I started off, of course, in market 163, whatever it is, and went up to
Yeah.
market two. So I've kind of run the gamut. So that's basically my history. I spent a lot of time teaching in University of Central Florida and also in Valencia Community College in Orlando. So I had some teaching experience, which I bring with me when I bring on uh, uh, proteges, if you will, to the business.
So I'm curious about the fact that you decided to go to college a bit later in life.
Mm.
I did as well, but not for engineering. I had an interest in weather, and I wanted to have a side gig as a TV weatherman. And I was doing some TV weather, but I thought I need to know more about this. And so I was about 35 years old also when I went to college. Actually, it was a certification program, but it was through Mississippi State University for 3 years to get a certificate in broadcast meteorology. But I'm really curious about what motivated you at 35 years old to do that, and obviously, is it okay to take 9 years to do that? How did
Well,
was it part time for 9 years?
yeah, because I was working full time for radio stations in Orlando, and basically chief engineer. I mean, long hours, long days. I took evening classes primarily. It took 9 years to get through it, but I
Mhm.
also took a lot of other courses outside of the curriculum. Into history, so I took a lot of courses in history and sociology and mathematics. That I had like five statistics courses alone. It's easier to learn the math than it is to say the word. Um, so it's hard to say what motivated me. I don't even remember. I just one day I decided I really needed to get a proper education. I felt it was holding me back to being a better engineer than what I had been, and I thought I was okay, but
Yeah.
I got a little better after I learned some of the fundamentals.
Wow. Wow. I mean, so 9 years. So did you you finished up in your mid 40s? did that result in a degree? You said a double E
Yes,
degree?
yes, electrical engineering degree. I started. I got halfway through a master's degree in and not sorry, not electrical engineering, industrial engineering management.
Uh-huh.
I didn't finish because I became promoted at my job, and at the point I just said, I've had 9 years of this. It'd be nice to go home at night and not have to break out the books again. I mean, I spent
Yeah.
all weekend long listening to Mozart with the calculus books on the floor of my house, studying, and that wears you out after a while.
So I guess we're going to take a quick break here for a commercial. When we come back, there's one more question I have about maybe several questions about the education part, and that is, how has it served you practically? I don't know that you're designing circuits, or how you're putting what you learned to use, and maybe you know. When I went to school for weather, I think I already kind of had a handle on how all this stuff works, but going to university for um, you know um, um, macro scale systems and micro systems and radar and hydrology and all, the condition of the atmosphere, these things, they just got really fine tuned and they started to make a lot more sense. They made my hunches generally, they confirmed my hunches and occasionally dispelled a wrong hunch. So I'm really curious about how that served you well. We're going to take a quick break. This show, This Week in Radio Tech, episode 619, is brought to you in part by our friends at Broadcast Bionics. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the Bionic Studio. The Bionic Studio brings all audience interaction to the fingertips of a production team in radio, TV, and podcast. Our workflow-led system is working 24/7 around the world for small broadcasters and national and international networks. Our telephony module, Bionic Talk Show, allows cost-effective centralization, remote operation, scalability, and resilience across an entire network of stations, but at the same time is used in single-studio self-op environments. Social media curation and activity is now considered a broadcast-critical part of programming. Bionic Social means the studio isn't overwhelmed with a wall of interaction from an ever-growing number of social platforms. We combine SMS, MMS, and email together with a speech-to-text service for listeners using smart speakers. We enable studio teams to curate, filter, and display all platforms in one place, and post text, images, and video content to multiple platforms in one operation. Effortless collection of video content with Bionic Director has helped position some of the world's most successful stations as leaders in viral content, generating appointments to listen and free marketing via retweets and shares. Bionic Contest enables end-to-end tracking of on-air competitions, live reads, and prizes. These could be on-air contests, automated SMS entry, or online. Anywhere, and Skype TX for Radio brings high-quality audio and video contribution into the studio with ease. No need for dedicated PCs to run different applications. Everything is controlled within the Bionic Studio UI, and incoming connections are visible to users along with all other platforms. Our codec integration enables connection, algorithm configuration, and directory to a wide range of IP and ISDN codecs. The Bionic Studio, a unique suite of products designed to enable your talent to work smarter.
The Bionic Studio from Broadcast Bionics. You can go to their website at bionics.co.uk. Of course, you can email them. And I love their website. Lots of helpful information there. And I'll tell you what, if you as an engineer, you can bring this kind of technology into your radio stations and really give your talent some, I guess this phrase, it puts meat on the bone, right? It lets your talent easily access lots of content that they want. It's almost like, on a sports broadcast, you got the play-by-play person and the color person. The color person provides all these extra facts surrounding the play-by-play about the players and the teams and the games. So that's what the Broadcast Bionics Bionic Studio can help do for you. All right, check them out. Thanks a lot, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Dennis Sloatman. Dennis, I was going to wrap up the education part of this, and we're going to get into some cool technology and practical tips. But I want to understand, I want to understand what this double E and all that learning did for you. How have you been able to put that to work? Or how's it really boosted what your career already was successful? How did it make you even better?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that there's a couple of things. First off, I took a lot of programming courses of various languages, Linux, C, C++, um, and that's helped me a great deal with programming modern remote controls that use like a pseudo visual basic sort of thing where you have an object and properties. And that's been very helpful for me. And it's given me an advantage, I feel, over some of the guys that kind of struggle with that sort of thing. The mathematics, they said, helps me troubleshoot more than anything else because you learn how to solve problems and complex problems and eliminating variables and substitutions and making educated guesses. The So I mentioned the programming, which I think is very beneficial. I do a lot of control programming, like an industrial engineering sort of thing with PLCs, and the PLC language is called ladder logic. And but still, the concepts that you use in programming, like for next loops, if then statements, conditional statements, exception error, handling exceptions or errors. The concept is all the same. It's just different language. So I think that's part of it. And I think the broad-based education that went underneath, beside the electronics courses, kind of it allows me to talk on a number of subjects without seeming monodimensional. Like many of us engineers get accused of being monodimensional, and I like to be able to talk about just about anything. So I hopefully that answers the question, and that's about really all that comes to mind at this point.
You mentioned that you've been able to groom applicants, groom engineers to take your place at several stations. And we were talking about how some people seem to be able to graduate college with some kind of electrical degree, and they get interviewed for a broadcast engineering position, and they kind of have trouble with Ohm's law. Do you have any stories or feelings about the state of education of a lot of people, or are these just the odd examples that stick out because they are a bit remarkable?
Well, what I found is that the colleges tend to it's very market specific. They tend to cater their education to where they are. For example, University of Central Florida, where I went, they catered to the Space Coast. And so a lot of the courses were designed to make you, spacecraft engineers and so on and so forth, and a lot of research in laser technology and so on and so forth. In a town like Rockford, Illinois, the college it teaches more vocational skills, and so I think every college sort of teaches to the market that it's in. And that's something. Now, in my case, I had no choice. I had to go. I love UCF, and I had to go to UCF because they're only 2 miles away from me. But that's why you choose colleges, if you have the choice to fit whatever you're looking for. But I got a good broad-based education, especially the mathematics. That doesn't change anywhere, and that's proven very, very useful for me, especially when I'm asked to write articles on microwave propagation or three-phase power. I can explain the theory, hopefully in a way that, having been on the other end of this, where I didn't really understand what I was doing when I was working with three-phase power and microwave signals and so on and so forth, I can understand how to explain it in a way that a new guy coming into the business might better understand it.
Interesting. I wonder if you might speak to one topic, and that is about troubleshooting. And maybe you can dispel me of an idea that I've had for a long time, or provide an alternative. And that is that I find that the only way that I can really troubleshoot a system is if I already know what good behavior, what proper operation is supposed to look like, supposed to sound like, and be like. And because if I don't know how it's supposed to work, then I really don't have much chance of understanding, well, what's wrong, and finding the bad place. So, I enjoy looking at systems that are operating correctly and kind of taking that in, So I have not only have an intellectual, but maybe even an emotional understanding of how this system works, so that when it does go wrong, I have a better idea of what to go look for. Do you have any thoughts about that tech?
Well, yeah, the you ask one. This relates to the education. I learned how to read schematics at a very young age, very
Mm-hmm.
young. I don't even remember when, 16, 17 years old. Um, so and then when I worked for Harris, of course, we walked around with big manuals, 3 inches thick, with schematics in there on the systems. We had to learn all of that stuff. So that was kind of like a pre-education. What the formal education did is allow me to understand at a little deeper level how circuits are supposed to work. So when I look at a transmitter schematic, for example, and I'm looking at a power supply problem, I understand exactly what each component does and why they chose that value, and that helps me to troubleshoot. So maybe that'll help you a little bit with what your question about what I felt the education did for me in terms of that. But it's become kind of a skill that I'm pretty comfortable with. That I can troubleshoot just about anything. And if I can't, I got to call tech support. If I'm
Sure.
working with equipment I'm not familiar with, yeah, then I call tech support. That's a smart thing to do, because you can't possibly know everything. The different kind of equipment there's really no job like broadcast engineering, where you're marrying all these different technologies, IT and high power transmitter and high power industrial systems, cooling systems, water cooling systems, air cooling systems. It's a very industrial sort of job, and yet you're also working with computers. Uh, I don't know of any job even close to this in terms of the broad-based knowledge, but you can't know everything, and sometimes you have to call tech support. But again, the broader based knowledge you have, and you're talking to the tech support guy, you can ask better questions, and you can
Mm.
understand his or her answers better than you would under any other condition.
Well, if you wouldn't mind, let's turn our attention to this topic that is near and dear to your heart, and that's remote control, and
Mm.
a technology as part of that, SNMP. Um, uh, I well, I haven't had the pleasure of installing one of the more modern remote control systems that even has a SNMP. A lot of my transmitter sites were just getting out of the era of the sign systems dial-up remote control, and so they're always there's always so much hookup to do, and getting the sample values to be about right, and then dialing them in. And I could kind of make assign systems walk and talk in terms of doing some automated functions, but I feel like I'm way behind. I feel like I'm way, pretty far ahead in terms of computer technology, but remote control, I'm so far behind. Help me become excited about good remote control using modern technology, and help me understand how it's really going to help me out. Me with my closest radio station, a 6.5 hour drive away.
So you mean you didn't enjoy programming the RFC 1B by a speakerphone with a touchpad and looking at the manual with the arcane
Actually,
code?
I did. I was good at following the lines on the manual down every time I'd hit, what was it, pound to move on.
Yeah, that device was memory challenged, but it was appropriate for the time.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so limited memory, but yeah, with the more modern systems like the Burke Arc Plus, and I'm not plugging Burke, but it's one I had the most experience with. Um, and the combination of their autopilot or macros, whichever you choose to use, you have a choice of writing macros, and they make it
Hmm.
pretty easy for you. Um, but with SNMP, well, first off, with remote control, all these monitors you see around me, I control all the radio stations I work with down to a granular level. I can, if something ever needs to be rebooted, I don't just reboot the machine and then go back to my car and drive back home again. I say, you know what? I better put a reboot box on this thing. Um,
Mm.
and if equipment has capability, I don't like to see bare terminals on the back of any piece of equipment. If it's got capability that I can use to not have to drive 2 hours, nobody cares and nobody's impressed if you come in the next day and say, I drove to the transmitter last night at 2 o'clock in the morning. That doesn't impress anyone.
Mm.
I've been in the business 53 years. I guarantee you what I'm saying is right. So don't think you're going to impress a general manager. what will impress them is you had a problem and you just got up out of bed, walked to or pulled out your tablet, and you pressed a couple of buttons and you fixed everything or bypassed the problem, and you go back to the site the next morning after you've gotten up and you're not tired and you've had a shower and everything else. Going out in the middle of the night is for the birds. I haven't had to do that in, I don't know, probably 12 years, maybe more, because I spent all the time up front with remote control. Now, having wired a lot of remote controls with, one wire at a time, SNMP brings a whole new feature to that, a whole new venue, because I basically wired this remote control in Virginia Beach just by sitting at my house using SNMP. It just did virtual wiring, connecting all the meter readings, the remote control, the status, all the stuff that's made available. Transmitters like Nautel, for example, if you want to know the speed of a fan, one of its fans, you can bring that out. So you can wire remote control. Now, what I often do though is I'll combine GPIO with that. The real critical functions like transmitter on off and forward power, I hardwire those. But then all the other auxiliary readings like modulation level, bias levels, HD level, efficiency, all of that sort of stuff, I use SNMP. And you can do it all from your laptop, wherever you want to do it, and wire your transmitter site. And I'm not saying you do it all that way, but you want to put some common sense, because computers fail. They're not 100% reliable. So you have to use a mixture of SNMP and GPIO. But as time goes on, I'm finding this SNMP is extremely reliable. And once I've used it, it's as reliable as any other piece of equipment in the station.
Am I? Well, I must be. Am I incorrect in imagining or thinking that SNMP somehow is pretty inefficient? There seems like a lot of potential bits to go back and forth, or checking, or triggers, or I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of rigmarole to end up getting what you want. But am I misinformed? Do I have a bad opinion of that?
Well, there's a learning curve initially when you go to use it. I mean, even when I first, the guy who got me inspired was the guy that I hired to replace me in Los Angeles, Doug Irwin. He's really into SNMP. Good friend of mine. He also shares my love of remote control. When you have sites in like Mount Wilson in California, and sites that are 30 miles or take 2 hours, 3 hours to get to in LA traffic, you make use of everything you can get. But SNMP, there's a bit of a learning curve, but if you're using like a Burke remote control or Davicom, any of these others, you basically can import the MIB file. It's called a management information base from the manufacturer, and you so-called walk the tree. You bring it up in the remote control. You drill down to the object that you want, whether it's a status or a metering, and you assign it to a channel. It's all click and drag and drop. I won't lie, there is a learning curve to that, but I just kept doing it until I finally figured it out. And I'm not an expert at it like maybe Chris might be, but I guess I can hold my own.
Well, I want to give a shout out to our friend Tony Scott Peterly. He conducted a nuts and bolts session at the Wisconsin Broadcasters a few years ago, where we all had laptops, our own laptops, and we all downloaded a MIB file and some program to help us, look through that, and he made us figure out, how to turn a little light on and off on a power strip that he had, and a few. I kind of barely figured it out last second, but to me it was one of those things that, I think I've got this figured out. And then, an hour later, I'm kind of like, no, maybe I've forgotten it now. So I really want to get into this and understand it. And you mentioned Burke and Davicom. So I take it, since you enjoy both, or you need both GPIO and SNMP, I take it some Burke units can do both of these at the same time, right?
Yes. And listen, you can do it any way you want. I've just found that it's just my opinion that you want to don't totally divorce yourself from using GPIO, because that's very reliable. So I use GPIO for, like I say, the real super critical functions that I can't worry about a computer crashing, like transmitter on off, switching antenna, tennis switches, and so on and so forth. But for all those little things like transmitter stack temperature, all those, if you look at an Autel MIB using a MIB browser, is what you're talking about. If you
Yeah.
look at a MIB and an Autel, they have Autel. You went overboard, man. They got SNMP objects down to every single fan in the place, every single heatsink temperature. You can bring all that out and display it on your iPhone. And by the way, broadcasters are always kind of slow to adopt technology. The IT world's been using this for years to monitor their computers, temperatures in the computers, power supplies, using SNMP managers, and broadcasters finally are kind of catching up to that. But that's how a guy in Dallas, Texas, can monitor every PC throughout the corporation and set alerts so that if a PC is about to die, they're going to know about it. And we can do that same thing in broadcasting. And as I say, nobody's impressed with you driving to the transmitter at 2 a.m. I can get an alert on my phone for anything, a fan failure, and I'm just picking something at random. One of the little muffin fans went bad in an Autel transmitter. Well, I'm going to know about that before it becomes a real problem. And also, before I go to the site, I'm going to know what to take with me. In the old days, we'd have to drive to the site, see what the problem was, go back and order it, then take it back to the site. Oh, it doesn't fit. We got to go back. That's for the birds. Now you can determine which module failed. Get on the phone with the manufacturer, say, send me one of these. You go to the site once, taking what you need to fix it. And that's what impresses people, not the 2 o'clock in the morning drive to the transmitter.
Oh, good true words. That's good advice. Thinking about either MIB browsers or whatever's built in with whatever MIB browsers or functionalities are built into Burke or Davicom. Is there a MIB browser that you like, or some way I can kind of dip my toe in the water and start to learn about this?
Well, you know what, the manufacturers like Davicom and Burke, in their own software, they build in a MIB browser, but you can download. There's several. Just type it, Google MIB, free MIB browser. There's
Okay.
probably 5,000 of them out there.
Oh,
but yeah, the ones that I tend to use are the manufacturer specific units. But they're MIB browser is very portable, so that if I'm using a Burke remote control and a Gates transmitter, a Burke remote control and an Autel, I'm using a Burke remote control and a let's say a Telos object. I use them for Telos as well. You can drill down to all this stuff, and so it's all portable. It's all universal. It's all follows the same format. But just if you want to play the MIB browser, just Google them. There's just a ridiculous amount of them.
okay, good deal. Well, we're going to hear maybe a little bit more about that and get into aggressive neglect and some ideas about cabling and how to make it better. I had to make a trip last weekend to one of my radio stations, and it was just a small amount of IT stuff, but I really had to neaten it up, and I did. I got more to do, but I made it better. Cut cables to length, got rid of the stupid long ones and put in the shorter ones where they should be and all that. So I want to hear Dennis's ideas on that. Much more sophisticated than what little bit that I did. Hey, This Week in Radio Tech, it's episode 619. I'm Kirk Harnack. Dennis Sloatman is our guest. Dennis has had a long career in broadcast engineering. He's been a lot of places, learned a lot of things. And everyone that I know that I've asked about Dennis speaks so well of him. So I'm just looking forward to continuing to learn from him. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Angry Audio. You know, Angry Audio, this is Mike Dosh's company. And honestly, it's down the road from me. It's literally 18 miles away in Franklin, Tennessee. And Mike hires good people to do specific work. He's hired Cornelius Gould to do some audio processing. He bought the Studio Hub company, radio systems and Studio Hub. He bought the Studio Hub stuff to keep the brand alive and keep the equipment flowing. So people just love Studio Hub adapters, connectors, and things like that to help wire studios. And then a few products that he's continuing. This is a Studio Hub headphone amp. A lot of folks love these. It comes in this, Decora style. So, Decora plates and fixtures and boxes, things like that. That all fits this just fine. And you can also use the Studio Hub standard wiring scheme right here. You have left and right audio on each RJ connector on each one of these. And then there's also plus and minus power that can be daisy chained from one of these to another. I think you can power 4 of these if you don't drop them off of one power supply. So you can outfit a studio with these headphone amps, and they're really good. They have both sides of connectors too, 1/4 inch and 3.5 millimeter. So easy to install and effective. And speaking of installing and connectors, here is something that Mike Dosh invented. Well, yeah, he took several good ideas and put them together into one product, and that's the headphone disconnector. What does it do? Well, I think you can guess, but I'm sure you've seen this. Headphone jack in there, and the talent gets real excited or gets a quick break and has to get up and go to the bathroom. What do? They get up, the headphones are still on, and they walk away. And you ever drive away from a gas pump with the pump handle still in your car? I must admit, I've done that once. Never do that again. But this is what you need. This is the headphone disconnector. I'll hold that up to the camera there, and you can see there's kind of like a MagSafe style connector there. And if your talent gets up and walks away, boom, it doesn't break the headphone plug off into the jack. I think I told you a story a few months ago. I was in Greenville, Mississippi, and somebody handed me a headphone amp and said, yeah, this has a problem. And sure enough, the quarter inch headphone plug was broken off in the jack. It wasn't too hard to extract, but they didn't get to use it for a few months between my visits there. So the headphone disconnector solves all that problem. It just goes right back together just like that. You want to check out the website? Suncast has it up there. It's angryaudio.com. Angryaudio.com. The headphone disconnector, no more broken headphones or headphone jacks around your studio. Really cool. They got a lot of good stuff there. Check it out at angryaudio.com. Hey, and I want to thank our other sponsor on this segment, and that is Max Connect Wireless. Oh my goodness. This thing saved my bacon and WEVL's bacon a month and a half ago when we stayed on the air all weekend with one of these. And here's Gary Morrill to tell you more.
With all of the recent cybersecurity attacks against large corporations, we were looking for a product that would give us the ultimate security at our transmitter sites and as well as with our broadcast equipment. Max Connect fits the bill very well. Its greatest security feature is the fact that it gives you a single static IP address. Using this single static IP address allows us to close hundreds of open ports on our firewalls across the company and restrict access to only the Max Connect IPs. This has greatly reduced our exposure to the World Wide Web and made us much more secure moving forward. It has also given us the ability to expand as needed in a secure fashion.
Sorry, that was John Tacok. Well, John, thank you for that word about Max Connect Wireless. Love these things. Single IP address. Ports are available for you to open up if you want to poke directly into it from the outside world. These even have VPN capability. That's in the modem itself. What makes Max Connect work is the SIM cards that go inside, because they'll connect you to your favorite carrier and you get special treatment. Your packets are more important than anybody else's except first responders. So you can have a whole stadium full of people doing Facebook updates, and they're getting slow as molasses service, and here you are getting your guaranteed speed. Well, it's amazing how well this works. Check it out. You can use it for remote broadcasts or transmitter sites, or if you've, like I did, WEVL lost their service from Comcast because of a very bad lightning strike. And we got them back on the air pretty quickly with Max Connect Wireless. Check it out at maxconnect.com. We'll have a link in the show notes. Thanks a lot to Josh Bone for providing us with Max Connect. Great idea, and it actually works well. All right, Kirk Harnack here at the TELUS Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee, and our guest is Dennis Sloatman. Dennis is one of those engineers who's just, really, really good, full of great ideas and puts technology to use well, knows what he's doing. One of those top-tier engineers that, got a cadre of people that he knows that he kind of brings up to his level. And I know, I'm sure there's people that Dennis looks up to as well. But it's great to have a top-tier engineer with us. So, Dennis, you want to talk about cable management, which doesn't seem like it takes a double E to do that, but, neatness and, some regularity, that's all appreciated because I guess it makes troubleshooting a whole lot better when things do go wrong.
Certainly, before I answer that, though, I've got to tell you,
Mhm.
I think you voided the warranty on that angry audio panel when you dropped it on the table.
I probably
But,
well, certainly I voided the warranty on my old Mac keyboard. That's for sure.
and by the way, I want to take this opportunity to do a shout out. One of the people I look up to is Cornelius Gould. I think he's just a fantastic guy, and I'm really happy to see him doing well. And anything he makes, as far as I'm concerned, is beyond reproach. Um,
Eh,
Cable
yeah.
management,
Yep.
that's interesting. I'd have to think about that. But what got me started with that is I was 18 years old, just out of college, or high school, working for WRRR in Rockford, Illinois. And I worked for a chief engineer named Larry Caldwell, who to me at the time seemed like an old guy because he was 43. My son's that old now, basically. So, but you know how it is. But he was a real stickler, and for organization and so on and so forth. He taught me like to organize your parts the same way industrial, like Newark's catalog. Now they're Element. What are they? Element 4 now. Element 14. Um, but he said you organize all your parts in your storeroom like they have in the catalog, light bulbs, chemicals, and so on and so forth. But he taught me the wiring, and he was real stickler on wiring. Made me do work over a couple of times before I. And then from that point on, I became fanatical about making wiring look neat. It's just so much easier to troubleshoot. You feel better about what you're doing when you go into a clean site um, where the wiring's where you got a chance of fixing it. You're not tugging on wires trying to spend time seeing where does this go, where does that go. That leads to other things like documentation. And one of the things that I like to dispel is somebody it said I'll fix it later. That later never comes.
Mm,
We all know that.
mm,
And the other
mm.
thing I hear is I don't document anything until after I get the project done. Let me ask you this. When's the last time you built a house and the architect says, I'll draw the plans up for your house when the house is done?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. So
Oh gosh.
usually what I'll do is before I had Visio, I do it all on graph paper and using stencils and so on. But nowadays I use Visio and I draw out on a plan what it is I'm going to do for a particular project. I do all the research then. That's when that's when I'm an engineer. I do all the research. Then I say, okay, well, how does this work? What is this going to need? What AES level are we talking about here? And then I put it on a drawing. I put all the IP addresses, all the stuff you need. So all the head work is done. It's done in advance. You got a Visio drawing. Now I got a blueprint. I can build my house. So when I go in and so that's the engineer phase. So then when I go to the transmitter or go to a studio and I just start putting everything together, all I got to do is I become a technician at that point. I just follow the
Hmm.
drawing. I don't have to do any head work. The head work's all done. So that's my 2 cents on that. Um, I've too long in my career. I've heard people say I'll document it later. I'll put it on that never happens. So I'm very much for documenting, doing all the head work ahead of time, keeping the cables neat. It's professional. When's the last time you walked into a place like a Google or a regular data center and you see wires laying on the floor and junk all over the place? And we shouldn't do it either. But the getting to the topic you brought up earlier, aggressive neglect. That's my phrase for um, radio stations I've seen. I've seen a lot of them, including Los Angeles. By the way, Los Angeles isn't any better than anybody else. It's just bigger. Um, where you walk in and you just see like nobody's cared for this facility for years and years and years. Like if they were hired to ignore the facility, they couldn't have done a better job. And that's what I mean by aggressive neglect. It's like they made a point out of making it. I'm talking Burger King wrappers laying on the floor, ossified sandwiches laying around. Just so they've been there so long that they're petrified. So that's the sort of thing that I just really burns me when I see that. It shows a lack of respect for the business and a lack of respect for the facility. So um, and people judge me by the work I do. And when people come in and follow me, they don't, they see neat wiring and they see documentation, and it pays off, even if many of us unfortunately don't see the need for that.
Let's talk about putting this to use. So you like to use Visio to draw out your plans and ideas. Do you use libraries of stencils? Have you had to pay for those? Are there free stencil libraries? Like, how do you kind of get that to work for you where what you're proud of what came out of Visio?
Yeah, that's a very good question. No, actually, I tend to do everything in block diagram form. I just use
Mm,
stock, the stock basic shapes as they're called. I
mhm,
use they also have built into their professional Visio. They have network objects, computers, printers, and so on. I use those, but I
mhm.
usually just if I have something unique, I'll make it myself and make my own stencil. But normally, I just do block diagrams, and it keeps it real simple. I might use some shading and some colors to make it look a little more interesting. Um, that can be overdone, but the main thing is that that it's clear that anybody can look at that and understand what it is you're trying to do. And I put as many notes on the page as I can without it becoming too cluttered. And I think that it keeps it from being intimidating to somebody else. So, and then I usually will run it by somebody else and say, does this make sense to you? Is there any question? If you saw this drawing, could you make this? So, so that's kind of how I test what I've done. But
Talk to
no custom stencils. Sorry.
talk to me about one thing I've always not been clear on is let's say that I'm going to number or somehow label cables. What kind of scheme do you begin with? How do you decide what number or where the hyphens are, or just how elaborate you're going to be in numbering a cable where you want to find or at least identify the other end of it?
Well, there's a lot of thoughts on that, and there's probably as many opinions on that. And again, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but this is what
Sure.
I do. I don't bother with numbers. I used to in the old days. I'd use those little peel off number things that come out of a little Rolo thing, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, wire number 1115 or 11-5. The problem with that is then is you gotta go find a piece of paper or something that tells you what that is. So I just use a brother labeler, nothing fancy, a brother labeler, and I label AES Flexiva AES input. Uh,
Mhm.
the Telos NX12 color output, and
Mhm.
plain English, so you can look at the cable and see what it is. Now, there's all kinds of fancy labelers out there, and I mean, Dymo makes uh, all sorts of things, and you can use whatever system works for you. But
Mhm.
I just don't like to look at a cable with some cryptic number and try to figure out what it means. I'd rather look at it and say, "Oh, this is the music on hold input to the telos." So I can see what that is. So that anyway, that's what I do, and that's just my solely my opinion.
I used to have a philosophy, and I think it's turned out to be wrong, where I had this theory that if I could stand somewhere and see both ends of a cable, I really didn't need to label it. That why label something that you can see the Gazeta and the Gazenta? And then I decided, well, maybe I should actually bundle these cables and not just leave them loose in the rack. So when I bundled the cables, then all of a sudden I didn't really know, you know, oh, I got this cable goes in the middle of the bundle now. I don't know which one it comes out as anymore. So
Right, right.
that theory kind of went out the window. But
But
so
that's
you label
absolutely
the
right.
cable with what it does. Hmm.
Yeah, basically, as I said, that works for me. And you mentioned the shorter cables. Yeah, sometimes if a cable's going directly from the output of a let's say a Voltaire to a TVC 15 using Telos Omnia's products, and it's a 6-inch cable. I may not bother with something like that. That's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that as you start bundling cables and so on and so forth, and yeah, you really need to label. I've gone so far as this is another pet peeve of mine that I'll mention.
Hmm. Yeah.
The wall warts. Everybody hates wall warts because they usually take up 2 or 3 outlet spaces,
Sure.
and that's a topic for another time. But when you have 6 or 7 wall warts in a rack and a power strip, nothing bothers me more than to know what that thing does, what it's connected to. Because I had a bad experience in Richmond when I first got here. I said, "Oh, let me just reroute this wall wart." I pulled the wall wart out. It was a to a digital DA that
Hmm.
both the main and backup STLs and the main and backup processors were connected to. So when I unplugged that thing, everything went down. So I said, okay. So from now on, I use the Brother labeler, and I label the wall wart that says Diva RDS unit, or router, or wireless access point. So at least you know what it is you're unplugging. And I've gone so far as to use tie wraps to secure the wall wart in the outlet too, because they tend to fall out. And
Hmm.
if it's around any area of vibration, I've had wall warts that have fallen out of old loose sockets, if you know what I mean,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
just fall out by themselves at 2 o'clock in the morning. So I like to secure the wall warts, and I like to label the wall warts as well. So speaking of being very um, OCD about labeling, there you go.
You brought up this idea of backup stuff, and I'll just interject for a second. I've always thought that if you're going to have, let's say, you're going to have two antennas, maybe on the same tower, heck, maybe on different towers, two, main and backup antenna, and main and backup antenna coax, and in the building you've got main and backup transmitters. Now maybe you've got a transfer switch between those, but you still got pretty separate systems here. If you got main and backup transmitters, well, my goodness, if you can possibly power them from two different, AC power feeds or sources, all the better. If you going to go to that trouble and you have two audio processors, main and backup, well, keep those separate. I don't know if you have them in different racks, but you keep these things a little bit separate. And if you're going to go, just go backwards as far as you can and keep things separate, so you don't end up with a single DA that is running both main and backup systems, where one wall wart falling out or failing would take everything off the air. And I've do this for example, in the Axia audio over IP world. If I've got a node or an X node that's feeding an audio processor for the main, I wonder if I could get the feed I'm looking for from a different X node to feed the backup. That way, one node failing doesn't take everything down. And as I just try to get that to go as far back in the system as I possibly can, if I've got the gear anyway, let's see if we can use it separately. So that's one idea. Maybe you got a thought about that. The other idea is, when you label things, I've often been torn about, do I label what the audio is that's going through it, or do I label the devices that it's connected to? And I've kind of settled on the devices it's connected to. So if I have an output of a node, for example, I'll label it, Omnia 9 in. So I'll label this output with what it goes and does, not necessarily WXYZ program 1, because we may change the radio station, but it's for a long time it's going to go to the Omnia 9N. You have any thoughts about organizing that kind of thing?
Well, you're absolutely right. I prefer to use where it connects to, so that let's say I just put a transmitter in last week, and it's several racks over to go through a conduit. So at one end I got a cable that says Flexiva AES1 in, and at the other end it says Omnia 11 AES2 out. I prefer to know where it goes, so that when I unplug it, I know, and that's all automatically going to tell me what it is it does. Now, if you want to add an additional label that says 96.5 audio, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, there's nothing. But you mentioned backups. That's a really good topic in itself. Doug Irwin and I whiteboarded several single points of failures when we were out in LA. We had a big whiteboard, and we'd sit there and draw all this stuff out. And give you an example that even in Los Angeles, so we had a main for KFI and KLEC, two big stations out there. They had two separate audio chains, except that both audio chains went through one distribution amplifier. So if the fuse blows in that distribution amp, two big AM stations in LA are off the air. So we tried to identify single points of failure. Now, when it comes to transmitters, having everything at the same site is okay to have a backup transmitter and so on, but it doesn't help you for vandalism. I've had 3 towers fall down on me in my career, and
No.
so nothing beats having an alternate site, because that way you have alternate source of power, alternate generator, different generator tank. You have a different tower, different location that might be unaffected by a wildfire or something like that. And also, it isn't just for emergencies. Routine matters like tower climbers that have to get on your tower to replace the lights. If you have an auxiliary antenna, you're going to have to power that one down too. So, nothing beats having an alternate site, even if it's not fantastic. Something where you have separate audio, separate transmitter, separate antenna, separate site, separate tower, separate generator. All of that stuff is going to really pay off. And not just an emergency towers falling down either. As I mentioned, workers on the tower, um, it could be a lot of things, maintenance on the tower, so on and so forth. You just go to your other site. And not everybody can afford that, but it's something where I think you make a good case with your management. Next year's capital, we're going to build an N+1 site, which is, for those of you not familiar with that term, that means multiple stations can go on the air from that site. Modern transmitters can do that very well. They're all frequency agile, no tuning required. With SNMP, you can hit the exciter and say, I want it to be on frequency 92.9 and take its input from the composite. If you send another command, it'll take the input from the AES and put it on 100.5. But if you come up with something like an N+1 site and get the audio out there through some means, whether a Barracks box or Zip1 or whatever, you're gonna be able to sleep better at night. And when that antenna burns out, or you have to get somebody on the tower and you got to shut down, you just turn the other site on. But so nothing beats an alternate site. You really can't do enough at just one site. No matter what you do, there's going to become a single point of failure at some point. And the single point of failure itself may be the tower itself, or just recently in Virginia Beach, we test the generator every week. This is very frustrating. That's the reason I don't have as much hair as you do, Kirk. You test the generator every week, it works every time. But somebody runs into a power pole. This happened to me in Orlando as well. Somebody runs into a power pole on the highway, and it's the only one that feeds a transmitter site. Rats got in and chewed the wiring up inside the generator, so the generator didn't start. That's the downside. So you may think you've got all this backup, but there's still ways for things to go wrong. And you can't make this stuff up.
Wow. Dennis, we got to take one more quick break, and we're going to come back maybe with a tip of the week or just some final thoughts from Dennis Sloatman. He's got some great thoughts on transmitter sites, on wiring and keeping things neat, labeling. This has been a good hour. We'll be back to put put some frosting on the cake here in just a minute. Our show This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you in part by Broadcasters General Store and VoxPro.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's VoxPro. Lots of different audio software out there. Why VoxPro? It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in VoxPro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here. Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready.
Ready for that secret sound.
Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit.
You are tackling secret sound, caller 9.
I'm ready, St. John.
One of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Final thing that I love about VoxPro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. VoxPro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about VoxPro, and you will be glad you did.
And of course, you can get VoxPro from Broadcasters General Store. They're where you ought to call for everything: studio lighting, cameras, microphones, mic processing, transmitters, all kinds of things. Even Telos Alliance Infinity intercom systems. Just anything you need. Call Broadcasters General Store. I like to deal with them on the phone. I just like to call them because I always get a friendly voice, competent service. good details on how soon something's available, and I always get the best prices from Broadcasters General Store. 352-622-7700. If you can't memorize that, put it in your little black book or in your iPhone or Android. 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. Thanks a lot, BGS and Vox Pro. All right, going to finish up here with Dennis Sloatman. Dennis, yeah. What if you had to leave us with one tip? What would you like to leave us with? This is your parting gift to our audience.
I may have something, but before I do that, I want to shout out. I've been around long enough where I've dealt with 3 generations of the shoots at the Broadcasters General Store: Bill, Chris, and John. So
Yeah.
it's that shows how long I've been around. Those guys are great people, and they've always come to my aid whenever I've needed it. One thing I'd say is engineers we all tend to do this, overcomplicate things. If you have a problem with a transmitter, or anything, you look at it and you say, gee, it's got to be something really bad because the problem's bad. And one thing that I keep referring to Doug that we used to talk about is Occam's razor, which, all things being equal, the easiest solution is generally the best. And you can look at these exotic problems being the cause of your issue, only to find out it was something really ridiculous. And most recently, and by the way, I'm not being sanctimonious here. I'm as guilty of this as anybody. I just recently installed a fax transmitter in Virginia Beach, and when I turned it on, it showed total reflected power, and I said, "Oh man, it must have been something I did." I had to cut all the transmission line and put all the pieces and bullets together. I didn't do anything stupid like leaving a bullet out, did I? Or something. So I kept pulling the line apart. Oh, it's not that. It's not that. And the Continental transmitter that was feeding its same port seemed to come up and work just fine. So I said, okay, it's obviously something I did wrong. Well, anyway, I beat my head against the wall. Finally, I went and looked at the antenna switches at the end of the room. They're hanging from the ceiling, basically. And it turned out that the antenna switch, it's an older switch, so that the marker that shows what position it's in was gone. So, so anyway, you can see where this is leading. So I went back there and I said, I wonder if this thing is in the wrong position. But how did the Continental work into this thing? Well, we'll never really know that, except it's a tube transmitter, and probably the reflected power section of the transmitter was on the fritz. But anyway, it turns out the antenna switch is in the wrong position. The transmitter wasn't even connected to the antenna. So I'm thinking all these bad things. All I had to do was move the antenna switch. So all things being equal, the simplest answer is probably the correct one.
Yeah. I would. Yep. I would definitely say so. You're right. I also want, the simplest answer is the most likely one. What about with a system that has broken several times? Do you tend to go to the thing that broke each time before, or are you open-minded to look for, well, maybe this isn't quite like the previous times. Maybe this is a different problem. I certainly get general managers and disc jockeys that say, oh, well, whenever I quit hearing the station in the headphones, it's because the transmitter went off. Well, except this time, maybe it was somebody unplugged the tuner in the rack and they can't tell the difference. But I had an IP radio die in American Samoa last night. I was up till 4 a.m. helping the guys configure a new one and put it in. We never really figured out what was wrong with the old one, but I just wanted, but we'd always had a problem with the RJ45 connector because I think I got water in it back when I installed it 5 years ago. It rained real hard, as it does in American Samoa. Anyway, do you have any thoughts about, probabilities of, well, it was this the last 4 times? Do you check that first? What do you do?
Well, I'm like anybody else. Yeah, it's a very good point. I think that I'm just like anybody else. If this thing failed the last time and I got a similar set of symptoms, that's the key thing. And I would say, well, last time it was, I'll check that, but you have to keep an open mind. If it's exhibiting the exact same symptoms as it did before, and it's been a recurring problem, yeah, you're naturally going to go to that. But you know, but when you're looking at a broader scale, like, well, the transmitter went off. Well, the GM says the last time that was due to a power failure. Well, we all know that when you're driving to the transmitter site, your mind goes through all the possibilities of what you're going to find when you get there. You can't help it. You can open the door and see black soot everywhere, like what happened to me in Orlando when the lightning took out the antenna switch. Single point of
Oh,
failure. Two transmitters, two antennas, one antenna switch. The antenna switch burns. You're really off the air.
yeah.
So, yeah, you never know, but you can't help it. So when you get there, you can find out it can be something simple, or you're going to be there all night. But yeah, I know what you're saying, Kirk, and that's just a very human thing to want to hope it's the same problem as you had the last time because you know how to fix it.
Yep. Yep. It's, and sometimes, we get a mindset when somebody tells us we're off the air, it must be the X again. And you're going, well, are the symptoms really the same this time? And you're driving there. Wait a minute. I'm getting a pilot light. I'm getting a stereo pilot on this thing. The transmitter's not off.
Yeah.
And of course, you may have determined that earlier by your SNMP or your remote control. I like you keep it open, go for the obvious, easy things to check first that it's been before, but keep an open mind that it could be something else, and don't let necessarily the non-technical person steer you into looking for the wrong thing that's wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that.
Okay. Dennis, it's been a pleasure. I hope we get to talk to you again sometime and maybe for a
Yeah.
longer period of time. This has
Had a lot
been
of fun.
just
Had a
great.
lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much. Dennis Sloatman, ladies and gentlemen. He's trying to retire, so don't call him unless you really want to open the checkbook. Okay. Thanks, Dennis, so much. And thanks to Suncast, producer of this show, This Week in Radio Tech, and also to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ Network. We got some great shows coming up in the next few weeks, and we'll keep revealing those to you. Be sure you patronize our sponsors. Really appreciate that, and let them know that you heard about them here on This Week in Radio Tech. Love you guys, engineers. Keep up the faith. Keep doing a good job. Do your best, and make our profession really what it ought to be. We'll see you next week on This Week